Have you ever held on to something so tightly, only to realize it was the very thing holding you back? This is the story of a woman who spent her life chasing enlightenment. She read every scripture, followed every ritual, and still nothing. Then one night, she dropped a wooden bucket. It cracked open, water spilled, the reflection of the moon disappeared, and in that single moment, she awakened. No water, no moon, no self. This is not just a Zen story. It's a mirror for you and me. The Zen story, Chiyono's Awakening expanded version. Long ago, in a quiet region of medieval Japan, nestled among mountains and mist, there lived a woman named Chiyono. She was not born into privilege or rank. She didn't wear silk. She didn't speak with scholarly words. She had no wealth, no temple of her own. What she had was longing. A quiet, aching longing for truth, for peace, for awakening. She became a nun at a humble convent, sweeping floors and washing robes by day, sitting in stillness by night. While other monks debated sutras and quoted masters, Chiyono asked herself the same question over and over: what is this self I am trying to awaken? Years passed. She meditated, she prayed. She read scriptures late into the night by candlelight. She bowed before statues of the Buddha, asking not for blessings, but for insight. Still no awakening. Still, the door to clarity remained closed. Her teachers said she was too attached, that her mind was still clouded, that she needed to let go. But let go of what? She didn't even know what she was holding on to. One autumn night, the air cool and crisp, Chiyono went down to the well to fetch water. She carried an old, weathered bamboo bucket tied together with worn rope and hope. The moon was full, casting silver light across the temple grounds. As she walked back to her quarters, water sloshing gently, she happened to glance down. And there it was, the moon, floating peacefully in the surface of the water. She paused. The sight was breathtaking, the moonlight caught in the bucket like a jewel in a poor girl's hands. And then it happened. Crack! A sharp, dry snap echoed in the night. The brittle bamboo gave way. The bottom of the bucket split open. Water rushed out. The moon's reflection vanished. She froze. Silence fell around her, broken only by the soft trickle of water soaking into the earth. In that moment, something within her collapsed too. All the years of striving, all the trying, all the tension, gone. Kokon. She later wrote, "In this way and that, I tried to save the old pail because the bamboo was unraveling and about to break, until at last the bottom fell out. No more water, no more moon in the water. Emptiness in my hand." But that emptiness wasn't despair. It was liberation. She had been chasing enlightenment as something outside of herself, as something to earn, to reach for, to understand. But when the bucket broke, when the illusion shattered, she saw clearly. The moon was never in the bucket. The truth was never separate. The seeking itself was the obstacle. And in the stillness that followed, she let go, not of the bucket, not of the water, but of herself, of the me that was grasping. And in that letting go, she woke up, not to some magical power, not to some cosmic light show, but to the quiet truth that had always been there, what it really means. Let's take a step back, that moment when the bucket cracked, when the moon's reflection disappeared. It might seem simple, but in Zen, that kind of moment can change everything. Because the bucket was never just a bucket. It was herself, the mental construct she carried, that the version of me she thought needed fixing, shaping, or purifying in order to become enlightened. The cracks, they were life's inevitable wear and tear, the aging, the disappointments, the heartbreaks, the things she tried so hard to hold together. And the water? That was her inner world, her thoughts, emotions, attachments, dreams, and fears. It reflected what she believed to be real, even sacred. And the moon? The moon is truth, pure, simple, silent truth. But here's the thing, she wasn't looking at the actual moon, she was looking at its reflection. Distorted, moving, dependent on the shape of her bucket and the clarity of the water. Just like us, We think we see the truth, but most of the time, we're just looking at reflections, ideas, labels, opinions, projections. We look at our lives and say, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is how things are supposed to be. But that's not the moon. That's the moon in the water, a beautiful illusion, but an illusion nonetheless. So when the bucket broke, something profound happened. She didn't just lose the water. She didn't just lose the reflection. She lost her entire frame of reference. And in the silence that followed, there was just moonlight, untouched, unfiltered, shining directly above. It had always been there. She just didn't see it clearly until her container, her mental framework, broke open. We spend so much of our lives patching up the bucket, don't we? We chase self-help books. We repeat mantras. We build our identity brick by brick. Career, relationships, image, success. But the harder we try to hold everything together, the more we block the very clarity we seek. Enlightenment isn't something you add to yourself. It's what remains when you take everything else away. And that's what makes this story timeless. Chiyono didn't have a grand spiritual epiphany on a mountaintop. She didn't levitate or glow or suddenly understand the cosmos. She simply saw, in that one quiet, devastating moment, that what she was seeking had never left her. It was just hidden behind effort, behind identity, behind the bucket. So the lesson is this: you don't need a new you. You don't need a better you. You just need to see through the one you've been trying to maintain. You're not the bucket. You're not the water. You're not even the reflection. You are, and always were, the clear sky that holds it all. And when you stop clinging to what's breaking, you'll see the moon again. What's your bucket? Let's make this personal. Chiyono's bucket was literal, made of bamboo and rope. But for you and me, that bucket looks different. And here's the question we rarely stop to ask. What's the bucket I've been carrying? What am I so afraid will break that I spend my whole life just trying to hold it together? Maybe your bucket is success. Maybe you've worked your whole life to be seen a certain way, to be respected, admired, validated. You built the resume, you chased the promotion, you hit the milestones. But inside, you still feel like it's never enough. You wake up each day and the thought creeps in, if I stop striving, who am I? And just like that, your identity is tethered to your achievement bucket. Or maybe your bucket is a relationship. You're pouring so much energy into holding it together, even when it's cracking. You're afraid to be alone. You're afraid that if it falls apart, it'll prove that something's wrong with you. So you keep smiling, you keep fixing, you keep sacrificing parts of yourself just to keep the water from leaking out. And you call that love. But deep down, you know it's fear. Maybe your bucket is your past. A story you've carried for years. Something someone said, something someone did. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's trauma you've never told anyone about. You've patched it up over and over with distractions, with busyness, with a smile that says I'm fine. But it still leaks at night. It still haunts you when the world gets quiet. You're holding a bucket that was never yours to carry. Maybe your bucket is the image of who you think you're supposed to be. The perfect mom, the strong man, the spiritual one, the funny one, the unshakable one. You've carried that image for so long that you've forgotten what your real face looks like. And here's the heartbreaking part. We spend our whole lives holding on to a version of ourselves we don't even like, just because we're afraid of what might happen if we stop. But here's the truth, Zen whispers. It's okay to break. It's okay to let it go. In fact, it might be the most sacred thing you ever do. Because until the bucket breaks, you'll never see the moon clearly. A gentle pause, So take a moment, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what's weighing me down? What am I protecting, patching, polishing, even though it's breaking me? What reflection am I chasing instead of looking up at the real thing? Because once you name the bucket, you've already started the process of letting go. And what's waiting on the other side? Not emptiness, but clarity, light, and the freedom of finally being able to say, I don't need to carry this anymore. How to begin letting go. Letting go. It sounds beautiful, right? Like freedom, like peace, like finally putting the heavy suitcase down after carrying it for years. But let's be honest, it's not easy. Sometimes the things we need to release are the very things that have defined us. Sometimes they're familiar pain. And in a strange way, that familiarity feels we'd slave because we're afraid of what comes next, of who we'll be without the job, the relationship, the control, the armor. So let's take this slowly, gently, step by step. One, notice what you're holding on to without judgment. This is the first and most important step. Before you can release anything, you have to see it clearly, and not from a place of shame or self-blame, but from a place of curiosity, of compassion. So ask yourself gently, what thought keeps coming back when I'm alone? What memory or fear shows up again and again? What story am I telling myself about who I need to be? You might find that you're holding on to the need to prove yourself, the fear of disappointing others, the pain of something that never got closure, a dream that no longer fits who you are. Just notice. That's it. Awareness is a form of letting go all on its own. 2. Practice letting go in small, everyday ways. You don't have to give everything up overnight. Letting go doesn't mean running away or throwing your life in the fire. It can start small. Let go of the need to win the argument. Let go of the pressure to have it all together today. Let go of the extra work you took on because you couldn't say no. Let go of checking your phone every 5 minutes to avoid discomfort. Every time you release something small, you're building a new muscle, the muscle of trust, of inner stillness, of faith that you'll be okay without clinging. Create space for stillness. Letting go isn't just about release. It's also about making room. Room for silence, room for breath, room for truth to rise without being forced. You can start with 5 minutes of quiet in the morning before the world starts talking at you. Breathing slowly for 1 full minute whenever you feel overwhelmed. Sitting under a tree, staring at the sky, doing nothing. That's not laziness, that's medicine. Because stillness isn't the absence of life, it's the ground where real life begins to grow. 4. Write it down, then let it go. There's power in putting words to what we carry. Write a letter you'll never send. List the fears you've never said out loud. Name the things you thought you had to be. Then, safely, symbolically, let it go. Burn it. Tear it. Bury it in the backyard. Or simply say out loud, I release this. You don't need a ritual to let go, but sometimes creating one gives your heart permission to follow through. Learn to sit with discomfort without fixing it. This is where the real work begins, because letting go often leaves a space. And that space can feel scary. You might feel lost, empty, exposed, uncertain. That's okay. It's part of the process. Most of us aren't actually afraid of losing something. We're afraid of feeling what comes after we lose it. But guess what? You can feel sad and still be whole. You can feel scared and still be safe. You can feel uncertain and still be on the right path. Sit with that. Don't rush to fill the space. The moon will rise on its own. Letting go is a practice, not a one-time decision. This isn't a one-day epiphany. It's not something you tick off a list. Letting go is a daily return, a gentle remembering, I don't need to carry this today. And then tomorrow, you remind yourself again. Until one day, like Chiyono, the bucket just slips from your hands and you realize you were never holding the moon anyway. Final reflection. No water, no moon. We often think of awakening as something dramatic, some lightning bolt moment, some mountaintop revelation, some sacred chant or ancient scripture that unlocks the secret of the universe. But truth? Awakening rarely comes with fireworks. It often arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, in the middle of doing the dishes, or walking alone on a foggy morning, or when something you've depended on finally breaks. That's what happened to Chiyono. She didn't find truth by searching harder. She didn't ascend to heaven. She didn't have a guru give her a golden key. She simply watched her bucket fall apart. And in the absence of everything she thought she needed, she saw clearly for the first time. No water, no moon, no illusion, just presence. The kind that doesn't need to be explained, the kind that doesn't need to be earned, the kind that just is. And maybe that's what you're being invited into right now. Not to strive more, not to improve yourself endlessly, not to figure it all out, but to pause. To soften, to let go of one small thing you've been holding so tightly and see what happens when your hands are finally free. Because here's something most of us forget. You don't have to be fully healed to be whole. You don't have to be completely fearless to move forward. You don't have to understand everything to experience peace. Sometimes the most sacred thing you can do is stop. Stop running. Stop pretending. Stop carrying what was never yours. No water, no moon, no striving, no performance, no mask, just breath, just being, just you, raw, real, and enough. So today, don't ask, how do I fix myself? Instead ask, what am I willing to let go of, just for today? Maybe it's a thought that's been weighing on you. Maybe it's a fear you've kept hidden. Maybe it's the idea that you have to be something more than you already are. Whatever it is, hold it gently. Thank it for what it's taught you. And when you're ready, set it down, because the moon has always been shining, even when you couldn't see it. And maybe this is where your awakening begins.